Welcome to the Comic Binge. I am your host, Paul Herman, and today I've got a very special show like I do every week, right? I mean, no, whatever. Anyway, I'm really excited to talk about this because I've been holding off for since the conception of the Comic Binge YouTube channel to talk about the heavy stuff, right? The big guns, and I've been trying to trickle it out over the years, and I think it's time to bring up. Well, it's a good reason to bring up the Killing Joke here in a second, but anyway, I've got an amazing panel of people to talk about and get into this. Let's just say controversial. I guess you would say controversial story. I guess I don't know. So if you're new here, please do me a solid and go and like the video. I hate saying that, but that's just the way we have to do things here in these days in YouTube land. And also, please go and subscribe to the YouTube channel. I really appreciate it. It only makes sense. Appreciate everyone's support already. And without further ado, I'll start adding the old guest in here. Mr. Chris Clow, how are we doing today, sir?
Tired, but all right.
All right. That's good. I'm
Let's
glad.
bring the energy level back up. Let's do it.
I mean, I didn't say it. You did. So, I mean, I'm not gonna take credit for that. So, anyway, and we also have the other main host we always have here, Mr. The Heart himself, the El Corazon, the Heart El Corazon, Javi Trujillo.
The other main host. Did I get promoted?
I've always said this about you. You're on just
I
as much
know.
as we all are now. I mean, come on. You've always been
I
promoted.
just feel like
Come on.
I'm the Johnny come lately on the show.
Oh,
I might have juiced
Not
that
here.
promotion a little bit. So
Well, thank you.
No, but Javi, glad to always have you here, sir. It always is very, very, very appreciative. And last but not least, someone I've actually managed to be on the show more than once, but not just once in the last past. We're talking this week and next week. I couldn't believe it. I was like, I'm just gonna throw it out there, and he took the bait, and I really appreciate it. So anyway, without further ado, Mr. Joe Corallo, sir, how are we doing today?
Doing well, and it was the best excuse I was going to have to reread The Killing Joke. So
you know what's funny is I almost figured that without even asking you before. I was like, I bet Joe hasn't read this very much. Just throwing it out there because I personally haven't either. So, but I know because I've seen other videos you've been on and other shows you've been on, and I know you're a fan of Alan Moore's work. I think for the most part you are, at least the early stuff. I don't know later stuff. I don't know.
Later stuff. I mean, I liked. I wouldn't say it's his best work, but like I liked Neonomicon even. Like,
which one's that? Was that one with the Wonder Woman like character?
No, it's the
no,
Gilman.
that's Promethea, which is very
Promethea.
good. But
Gilman,
but,
basically.
yeah, it's very Lovecraftian and.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
All right.
Yeah, that was one of the Avatar press books, and I also liked Fashion Beast, but that was like adapted from a script, like a film script he wrote in the '80s. So I think it was adapted by Anthony Johnston. I really liked it, but I don't know if I could count that as a more recent.
Right. And just for the record, we've reviewed From Hell with my wife and her podcasting partner, and I liked From Hell a lot. It's bonkers and very interesting. I love Alan Moore's stuff for the most part, but there's a year that like for me that once he hits a certain time frame, I'm like, I'm out. Like I'm good. Like, I don't know when that year is exactly. It's right around League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. It's right. It's not. I like that story a lot actually. And I need to finish
the first
it.
one, not all of the spin-off stuff.
Okay, I haven't done that. Yeah. I have the omnibus. So Joe, I may have to have you on for that too.
I have the like hardcover omnibus of the DC League of Extraordinary Gentlemen stuff. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Right on. Yeah.
America's Best, right? Wasn't that the imprint?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. America's Best. Yep.
I really quick before I don't want to do on a tangent here on Alan Moore, but it is The Killing Joke. But the fellow YouTuber who I think is one of the greatest of all time, For the Love of Comics, Angshuman, he actually turned me on to Top 10, and I thought it was really interesting premise. I hated it. Yeah. I read the first trade. I was like, nope. I'm like out. I'm out. I'm good. I'm good. No more top 10 for me. I'm good. So he
Yeah,
loves
no,
it. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Go ahead.
I get it. I read it once.
Probably all you need
I
to
mean,
do.
I've read it a lot of things once, but like,
Well, you've
You
read
gotta
this
put
one.
They got to put that on
I've
the
read it more
trade.
than once now.
I read it once.
Yeah.
Joe Corral.
Yeah.
It's Joe Corello, man. I mean, it's
Yeah,
perfect. It's
absolutely. I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, considering, I mean, we all know that for the most part, pull quotes are a scam, and people don't even read it or stuff. They go like, "Oh, I like you. You write what you think I would say, and then I'll tweak it, and then you print
Yeah.
it." And
Tour
we
de
all
force.
know. We all know there's a handful of comic writers who have been very generous with the amount of pull quotes they give. We don't have to name any names, but we can all think of a handful off the top of our heads. And
Frank
I'm
Miller.
just I'm gonna say maybe they didn't enjoy all of those books as much as they did.
That's fair. That's fair. Before we get into everything, I just want to promote something that will be on that this show is kind of a lead into, which is the Batman Book Club announcement that he announced today, which it's a little short video. It's like 14 seconds. I posted on YouTube too, but I'll make you all cringe through it. So here you all go. It eventually goes up here. Oh, come on now. Sorry, 1 second. Is this working? My internet's really bad, so I apologize in advance.
That's okay.
Okay, 1 second here. Show. I guess it's not working. So you know what? I guess I can't do this. Are you driving? Is it working?
One bad month from the Batman Book Club. Very cool. Oh, are we losing Paul? Did Ryan,
Yeah. So one bad month made it maybe one bad stream. Let's just say that.
Oh Lordy.
Yeah.
It seemed like it worked fine to me. You started it, it was working, and then you stopped it because you didn't think it was working. And it was again. And
you
it
gotta
worked
love technology.
fine.
He's gotta love technology. It like muted myself. I was like, what is going on here? Like this internet sucks, dude. That's all I gotta say.
Well, that's a cool
Internet-
idea.
Yeah,
It-
it was
it-
a wild
yeah.
ride.
Thank you, Joe. Oh,
You can
God,
put
that's
that on
hilarious.
the
That's
quote for
hilarious.
the episode.
Yeah,
Wild
Batman
ride.
Book Club, wild ride. I won't ever listen to these idiots, but it's a wild ride.
There you go.
No, but we got one bad month. The first episode drops Friday. I'm super excited about it. The first episode will be covering Riddler and Two-Face, and then we'll be covering every two books every episode. So 4 episodes in the month. It was my idea originally to do a week, and that was pretty ambitious, but Lauer, the host of the Batman Book Club, which I'll throw up here, he said, no, let's do about one bad month, which I really liked. And he talked about he didn't want to do the Killing Joke because he's already done it on his show. And I said, that's great because we can just do it for our show, right, Chris? So anyway, I wanted to get some people on here that love Batman, which Joe, I don't know your Batman love yet. We'll get into that in a second, but I want to get some other people on who understand the medium of comics, the history of comics, and loves comics, but also can look at this objectively and say if this is good or bad, which is the title of the show, which is the Killing Joke bad? And it could be maybe it's a hot take. I don't know, but one last thing before we get started, I wanted to do Joe a solid here and promote his book King Arthur. Now, this comic that Vault is Vault who's putting this out?
This is Maverick, the
Maverick
Cave imprint. Hmm?
Okay. So Mad Cave, I get Mad Cave and Vault mixed up all the time. Now,
So-
this is based this is based off the 90s cartoon, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And this was I've never seen it. I think I've only known it peripherally, but I know it's got like a massive cult following. Obviously, you have a comic based off of it, and I've been meaning to I've seen tidbits of it, and I've heard it's good.
Okay.
What's your history with this property, really quick, and just kind of how maybe just a little tidbit if you can, what information you can about this project?
Sure, I watched as a kid. It was a show I was a big fan of. Growing up, I was the perfect age for it. I was like 7 or 8, when it was on, and it was something like I thought about, and later with the internet would revisit. I even rewatched some of it a few years ago because it was like on YouTube. It's now all I think all of it's on Tubi, at least the first season, but.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, like I showed it to a friend of mine, like the first episode, because it was just like a cartoon. I'm like, oh, I should show you this cartoon. What was it, like 3 years ago? I think 2 or 3.
Oh, wow.
So, what was it? Last year at Baltimore Comic Con, we were, I was talking with Mad Cave, and one of the things that had come up was, like I'm like, if there's any like licensed books or anything like that, I'd love to like throw my hat in the ring there. How many people really throw a hat in the ring at this point for anything?
Right.
But,
yeah. Right.
But besides the point, I was like, oh, like this and that, and one of the things that came up was, are you familiar with? Did you watch? It was like Princess Guinevere and the Jewel Riders, like that show. And I was like,
never heard of it.
I was like, I never watched that, but I watched King Arthur and the Knights of Justice. So I said that like unprompted, and they were like, oh, okay. And then like, we kept in touch and all of that. And, that was available. I threw my hat in the ring. I ended up getting selected for the gig.
That's awesome.
And yeah, I absolutely loved working on it. It's all like, it's just being lettered now. It is mostly done. So
cool.
it will be out at the appropriate time. So
do we have a release date yet?
March 12th.
Hell yeah, dude. Well, around March 12th, I got to have you on. I know I don't have the biggest following here, Joe, but I want to make sure I get to promote you as much as we can because, you do great. People out there, go check out Beskar. It's on Hoopla, digital, physical, whatever. Beskar was a lot of fun. Science fiction stuff. Joe's a solid comic writer, and I wouldn't say that if I didn't believe it. I
appreciate that.
These guys know this. You don't know me very well, Joe, but these guys will tell you if I don't like something, I wouldn't say anything about it. So just for the record, I just want to make that for the record. So anyway, I've wasted enough time. Not promoting your stuff is a waste of time, but I've talked a lot, so I will shut the hell up. So anyway, let's talk about our main book here. So which is The Killing Joke by Alan Moore. And Brian Bolland, and forgive me, Javi, I'm gonna let you kind of take over a little bit of this because I'm terrible with names and I couldn't tell you the original colorist, but I want to give that person a lot of
John
credit
Higgins.
here. John Higgins, thank you.
Higgins, yeah.
It's
we
right
also
there.
colored Watchmen.
Yeah. Oh yeah, duh. See, I should know this, but this is how bad I am with colorists and inkers. I don't know them very well. I know it's bad. It's bad. So I just really quickly, so this starts off one bad month because the Batman Book Club already covered this. I wanted to cover this because this is what the main inspiration is for, the one bad month's comics that came out last year, which we'll get that. We'll save all that one bad month stuff for the very end of the month where we'll do our big recap with everybody, which Javi, you're officially invited to that, by the way. Which is 6 comics to read. And you'll have my full analysis there later, but this is the proper one to get into. And I have a very love-hate relationship with this book. But I want to give it to you guys first. So Reverend, you're my best buddy. I'll throw it to you first. Give me your initial take on the Killing Joke upon reading it, and read it again, and then we'll go around the horn and we'll go deeper into it after everybody goes.
Well, when I was a sophomore in high school, it was the coolest thing I'd ever read.
Really?
Yeah, because I've talked on this show and elsewhere before about how I kind of rebelled against the idea of the Adam West show. It's like, oh, it's just such a mockery of the dark vigilante that I identify with so much.
You're one of those.
I was one of those. I am no longer one of those. But at the time, it was its reputation was very well established by the time I read this book for the first. I think the first time I read it, I was in 7th grade, and it was shocking, and it was scary, and it was beautiful, of course. I mostly had been exposed to the Higgins coloring because the deluxe edition that Bolin first colored was not until like 08, 09?
2008.
2008.
Yeah,
Okay, thank
around
you.
then, yeah.
So, it was a beautiful book. It was thought-provoking. It was very shocking in the things that it depicted. And it gave, at least in my mind at the time, credence to the Joker's place as the greatest villain in comics. In the years since, I have
It's not Carnage. Sorry.
In the years since, I have personally reappraised it, and it is far less of an important story to me in the long-standing legacy of the Joker and of Batman. That's not to diminish its overall importance. I think that it
Agreed.
shoved comics into a level of maturation that maybe they weren't ready for at the time the book was published. But the maturation needs to have a point. It's I was the kid who, when I first watched Clockwork Orange, I hated it until I realized at the very, very end, in the final seconds of the movie, what the point of all of it was. And then now I think it's a brilliant movie. I don't feel like Killing Joke has the same kind of redeeming quality to it. It feels like it's shock for the sake of shock. And I mean, Moore himself has kind of disowned it in the years since. I mean, he's disowned superhero comics generally, but this story,
he disowns everything. It's still Alan Moore. I mean, you can't take that seriously, really.
It's
honestly.
interesting just because a lot of the things that he criticizes superhero comics for now, he basically innovated with this story. Like the idea of going with a harder edge, more adult-oriented idea of depicting these conflicts. And granted credit given where credit is due, the idea of Batman and the Joker as a mirror of each other, that was one of the themes that he tried to push forward in the story, and mission accomplished. But the legacy of the story is far more about the moments than it is about what the story was trying to say. It's absolutely worth reading just because of the artwork alone. Brian Boland is unmatched, and he has solidified himself as, in addition to being a definitive comics artist. I think most people, when they think of the Joker, whether they know it or not, think of Boland. So it's a story that it's not so much a love-hate relationship. I'm just not a huge fan of this story anymore, though I absolutely acknowledge what it did for the medium and what it did in depicting the Joker. But a lot of people have come up against this story in the years since and have done a far better job of depicting the Batman-Joker conflict. I know this is sacrilege to some people, and it's kind of a direct spinoff, but I far prefer 3 Jokers to the Killing Joke, especially. So,
well, man, I speaking of things I need to ask Joe about 3 Jokers. We'll get into that in a second, Joe, because I think I've heard you. I want to say you and Perch talked about it maybe one time. I don't remember. I thought you guys talked about it. But...
Here's one last thing that I'll bring up.
Right,
I mean, you see my little intertitle card. Like when I published my just my personal review of Joker the film, like I had people that reached out to me that were complaining that one of my chief complaints in the movie is that it has a big bat-shaped hole in it, right? The point of the Joker is to serve as a counterbalance to Batman. So if you have a story that is just Joker-centric without the counterbalancing hero, then to me personally, it falls a little bit flat. Killing Joke arguably started to push things in that direction. The Joker is arguably the most culturally ubiquitous supervillain in the history of the medium of comics and other media. He's the only character that has served as the basis for now 2 Oscar-winning film performances in the superhero genre. A lot of it might be because of this story, but in establishing the cultural ubiquity, I mean,
I think
it's a very important story in that respect.
All right, all right. I got a lot of things.
liking it and acknowledging it.
No, I'm not. I agree. Listen. Well, I'll get into it. Joe, I want you to give your thoughts here. Yeah, I'll ask your Three Jokers thoughts later on, but I'll remind myself about that. But go ahead and
Sure.
tell us your history of the Killing Joke here.
Sure. No, I mean, I read this. This would have been, around college when I read this, because I was getting more into DC stuff around early college, like Sandman, and I think I read Watchmen in high school, but
Yeah.
I mean, I got into comics with like, the Sonic the Hedgehog, like Archie comics, and then, like earlier in high school, I read some other things, but like it really wasn't until Ultimate Spider-Man and Runaways that I was like regularly reading like
No
monthlies
shit.
from like Marvel. Yeah.
You're an Ultimate Spider-Man fan. Okay, I love Runaways. Brian K. Vaughan Runaways is I know everyone loves it, but for good reason. It's great.
Yeah.
It's great comic.
But like those two right around the same time, for me, I was like, oh my God, this is fantastic. Like, I mean, Ultimate Spider-Man, I think, was a little ways in already, but not like that deep in, it was still fairly early in the series. But yeah, so yeah, it was late high school, early college when I was reading stuff like, The Dark Knight Returns, Watchmen, Killing Joke. And The Killing Joke was one of those books that, I was like, okay, well, really getting into the character, it was like Killing Joke, Long Halloween, Year One, Returns, like reading all that. And things that definitely people should keep in mind. While Brian Boland, brilliant line artist, does not understand this story years later for the deluxe edition. The colors are fucking awful. He's too close to the work, and I get it. Like, that's what happens, and he has a certain vision, but that's counter to what almost 20 full years beforehand, or about 20 full years or so. Like, that's like, you can't come back that late and completely change be like, instead of warm colors, it's cold. It's like you completely changed it, and it doesn't work here. Like, it just doesn't work. John Higgins did a much better job, and I think it's standing the test of time. And I think that's the general consensus from people as well, is that the John Higgins coloring is significantly better than Brian Boland did.
So, and to you, kind of your point, and Javi, you have a bunch of examples too, which I'll wait for you to come on and talk about that when it's your turn. But yeah, I want to really quickly show you this is now the Boland art, which I agree 100%. This is not even close to being as good. It's so much more vibrant and interesting, the Higgins version. And in comparison, and Javi, I'm stealing Javi's thunder. I apologize, Javi. But I just wanted to show, here's the line art, basically the black and white, which is fantastic.
The edition.
Yeah, no, I say line art. The artists know who I'm talking about, right? Am I right?
No,
Rob?
but this is specifically from the noir edition, which is different than the unwrapped editions that DC does. That shows more of the line art. The noir edition is more of like the inks.
Yeah,
that's fair. But so in comparison. And Rob, if you're watching still, I'm curious. I haven't looked in the comments yet. I'm sure if you've already said what your preference is. I'm already thinking you already know your preference, but to me, this is way more interesting to look at than this. That's just my personal opinion. I think, like Joe said, I think consensus is most fans who read this or like comics would say, oh, Rob, I love Rob. Anyway, so yeah, Joe, continue. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I wanted to just kind of show the audience.
No, it's fine. I do think the Killing Joke is a wonderful example of Brian Boland's artwork and a middling example of an Alan Moore story.
Yeah.
And so, it's... I do think, what was it? Tim Sale does make a very good point in the intro in the deluxe edition, which is for all of those like Batman landmark stories, like your year ones and your Dark Knight Returns and all of that, they were all sort of these multi-part stories. But The Killing Joke, you got the whole thing in one oversized book. It's a weird point, I think, to make when you're trying to sell someone on buying a book in the introduction. And I would also argue that the Batman Special #1 that Michael Golden drew is also a revolutionary comic that was a one and done that you could just pick up in one thing. But everyone, for some reason, forgot that book exists, even though I would say that's better than The Killing Joke. I think that Batman Special #1 that Michael Golden did with was it Mike W. Barr? Crazy underrated story that no one talks about, and it drives me insane because it's one of the better.
What's it called?
Batman story. It's just Batman Special #1.
1984.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that the one with the Wraith?
Yeah, that's the one with the like the villainous Batman.
Wait a minute.
Yeah. Okay.
Wait a minute. I think. Hold on, guys. Hold the phone here. Come on.
It's not Batman Year 2. It's
what?
Batman Year 2 is the Reaper, Paul. Not.
Yeah. The Wraith is like brown Batman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Until the New 52 redoes his look.
Yeah.
The Batman's Grave, Warren Ellis does it again.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and really quickly, if you're finished, Joe, I was going to move to Javi here in a second. But anything else you want to add before we move on?
I think those are the two big points I wanted to make. So yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right. And also before we get to Javi, I just want to show again another example of the colorization of this being brutal. I love this. This is so much more. This is a vibrant page, right? It's the original colors, and then we have Boland's art, and this to me just sucks all the energy out of the. It just makes it from like interesting to like. Bleh. I'm sorry. It's rough. That's rough, homie. So
no, it's embarrassing. Like
it's bad.
Like someone should have told Brian to not. Like it's really bad.
Don't. It's a no-go. It's a no-go. Javi, what's your history with this book?
Oh man, that goes back a while. I didn't read it when it first came out, but after the '89 movie is when it caught my attention. My first introduction to it was the Batman '89 movie magazine. One of the first articles at the front had pages and panels from The Dark Knight Returns and from The Killing Joke. So that's where I kind of discovered this two very disparate but landmark issues. So a friend of mine, I was in 7th grade, Liam, had a copy. And he didn't have a first printing, as I later found out, because on the back of his, up in the corner, it said suggested for mature readers. So I knew I was in for something different when I got to it. And it had already been kind of built up about, oh my God, the Joker rapes Batgirl. And at 12 years old, like my mom already had an issue with pregnant Barbara Gordon, Gordon's wife, like being in bed with like the sheet at the end of like issue 3 of year 1. Like, oh, that was too mature for me. My mom's very Catholic. Anyways, this was something that I had to hide. I literally hid my friend's copy under the bed so my mom wouldn't find it. So it left an indelible impression on me because I had never really seen art like that before that was so detailed and raw. And at 12, I didn't really get it. It was like when I saw Goodfellas for the first time in high school, and like I loved it.
Hell yeah.
And was impacted by it. But it wasn't until I got older and started rewatching it again that I could see the technique and why it was effective. And there's a lot of that.
Fantastic movie.
That's, like the story has gone up and down for me over the years. But rereading it right now, like just I noticed the use of like the first person perspective a lot. Like there's a lot of images that Boland is making you a part of the story. And you can see just everyone's POV, and it's really, really powerful work. It's far better than the story that it actually is. But it was something that I loved back in the late 80s, early 90s, got whatever printing was available, then went back and got the first printing. And then when the deluxe came out, got the deluxe edition. And then thanks to Ryan Lauer and the Batman Book Club, got the absolute version when it was like $24 on Amazon, which is a steal because it has both versions of it. Although I don't, it's kind of weird to have the original coloring on like the more of a newsstand type of paper, because it may recapture the coloring of the original version. It's not on the same paper quality, so it has a different feel because it was a prestige book and it had a lot glossier pages.
But when you but really, and this goes for every question for everybody, don't you think the glossy pages would have made it, the glare would have kind of ruined the pages a little bit?
Look bad on my first edition, so it just kind of throws me off, because that DC has been making that move to more of like I wouldn't say call it cheaper, but like more of like a construction paper type look for a lot of their trades lately.
Let me just really quick. I agree that like, this, because this is my first edition too, which I can't wait till my fun story about this. But I would say that even looking at a little bit of the this version, when I read it on here, I think it's a nice quality. I think the colors, to me, they're more vibrant through this paper quality, because of the colors are more muted. It's not so just does that make any sense? Like, I feel like there's more. Its impact is, in my opinion, and maybe you guys tell me I'm full of shit, which is totally fine, except for you, Chris. You can't tell me that. But the thing is, I just think that I like when they do this. I know they did this for the year one, which I have to get that
it's really good.
I need it.
And
I need it.
The other thing about like this story too, and the art, like you could not escape this book in 1989. You didn't have to read the book to see the artwork everywhere. This panel that I brought up right now was on every third person's t-shirt in line to go see Batman that summer. And then, you had, granted, this is the recolored version, but like this image was all over people's shirts. It was just, like Chris said, it was ubiquitous that summer. You could not escape Brian Boland artwork. And he became like a definitive Batman artist to me. He was one of my favorites as a kid. And then so going from this to like Dark Knight Returns, it's like this art is so ugly. Like I didn't get what Miller was doing then, because I was so enamored of like Jim Aparo and Brian Boland. So, and when we got to the 2008 version, like the coloring, I didn't hate it. I appreciated what he was trying to do with it, but it's like I told you guys before, like this is like Joel Schumacher coloring, and then you get your Chris Nolan coloring, like these are the colors in Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. And this is like disgusting, the coloring on this. And I don't mean that in a bad way, because changing the color to the more muted, like Chris Nolan type tones alters it, because like this is, it hits you in a completely different emotional way, because it kind of repels you and it adds to the horror of it, that without it, like it's, the imagery is not as bad, or it hits differently. And I really appreciate what Higgins did with his, but I can see the appeal of why someone would like maybe the more cleaner work and the different emphasis he puts on it. And the Absolute has I guess you could say it's a forward to the original edition, because it's in between both versions, that Higgins does, where he's very polite about the recoloring. And he kind of sees it as Boland's version is the Batman perspective of this book. And his version is more of the Joker's perspective with all the different colors and everything. And how both can coexist side by side, which if you have the absolute, you literally get the best of both worlds. And you have like the oversized format to really appreciate the line work. And for me, like going through it again, because I read pretty much all 3 versions in the last 2 days and watched the movie again. The art is really what I love about this book, and that's what keeps me coming back to it. Because as the story goes on, it's not. I don't hold it as in high regard as I used to when I was like 12, when it was new and shocking, and I'd never read anything like that. Because my dad brought me up on like Silver Age books and Silver Age reprints.
Yeah.
So stuff like in the Batcave, where we get that portrait, like I had a comic that had that pinup in it. So I knew that artwork. And that was something special to me to see that Batmobile, like that was the one I grew up with. So it mentions in the book that he was a big Dick Sprang fan. So I appreciated seeing little nods like that, but it's such a stark contrast with where this story goes. And this is like my first appearance to Batgirl and my first introduction to this Batgirl and Batwoman, because it was this picture. I never knew anything about him before and was just like, why is there a Batgirl that looks like Robin? Like the same colors, and they don't get a lot of love. But if you stick around for Knights Never Die and a year or two, maybe Chris and I will talk about this Batwoman.
Which, by the way, speaking of Knights Never Die, which is a fantastic series that Javi and the Reverend here, the El Corazon and Reverend teaming up for Knights Never Die, which I will show up eventually. But yeah, I can't wait to read that first issue. You guys banged it out. It's been a popular show on our channel. I mean, what the hell you guys need me for is what I keep telling everybody. So
emotional support.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, you know what? I have no problem being a cheerleader.
You only have at this point. You only have 1 issue to catch up on. So
I know. So anyway, if you're done, I didn't know if you were done or not. I figured you were, but I just wanted to.
Yeah, I think I've hogged the floor enough.
No, you're fine. I want to bring up something really quick before I get my thoughts. I love your bringing up this coloring, because the thing we forget about, I think, in film and in the visual medium, like comic books and film are very much a lot like this. Lighting is I say lighting in a sense of like, especially with film, but even with comics, that I think Higgins really got with Watchmen, is that the coloring affects the mood, right? It doesn't just affect the characters around it. It's like supposed to affect the reader or the viewer, right? And the one thing that film has always done is the lighting can affect how we perceive, or we're supposed to perceive the incident, whether it's supposed to suggest something or whatever, right? And I think that's the thing that Higgins does so well in Watchmen. And then something like this too. This is a powerful image, and like you said, Javi, the coloring. I don't really agree with Boland at all. And again, this is my interpretation. This is what's the beauty of art, and I say the capital A because it can be interpreted any way. I look at this as like it's supposed to symbolize anger and rage.
Yeah.
And that's what we're getting right here is the red. And that's what Higgins is, because if you look at this is when Batman gets stabbed and he's like looking for the Joker to beat the snot out of him. And, after what he's done. And I like this, that we're in this world, like, cause even like he's still green. Like, so he's still himself, but Batman, everything is red except for his eyes and like his teeth and his Joker's eyes. So again, it's symbolism, right? And maybe I'm reading too much into it. Tell me, guys, if I'm full of crap here. Okay. So, but I think that's powerful. And like you said, like Boland's version is just like, here's colors that are darkened. It's like, and again, it's fine, but it's just, it's more impactful to get the red to symbolize what the characters are feeling. Right. So
it can have its place. I mean, we've seen a lot of movies to varying degrees of success try this trick. You've got the noir edition of Logan. You've got the black and white version of The Mist. You've got the Justice's Gray version of Zack Snyder's Justice League. Because, being just Zack Snyder wasn't desaturated enough. You have to completely take out all the color. And I think there is some merit to either, this noir version, especially like in a panel like this, where you get like that kind of Sin City effect. But, there's a lot to be said for that, and how this was one of the images that was in that book I mentioned, where it feels like a 3D image, the way the glass is breaking and coming at you, and the way the coloring is, and the red shadows on Batman symbolizing that anger you just mentioned. Like,
it
hits, and it's a powerful thing. It's seared into my brain for the last 34 years. And while I like this, it doesn't have the same emotion.
Yeah. And so, we look at the other picture. Look, it looks fine. It's not terrible, but that red and that you lose the emotion of that and the dynamics all at once. So you lose dynamics, you lose the emotional approach to it, and just the coloring alone. It's crazy. It just, I've said on the show before, and Ram V, he echoed exactly what I said the other day. I've been in bands for many, many years. And making comics, the little I've known, is all about a band. Everyone has their part and their layers. And, sometimes there's some artists or some projects out there that are one person focused, but most of the time, the best comics out there are collaboration. And if it's one person's vision, it's usually not as good. That's just my opinion. It takes a team, or what's the word, an army to move a mountain, or whatever the hell that thing is. So
takes a village to raise a child.
That thing, whatever it is. I'm
actually curious, Joe, if you were given the opportunity, let's say that you are going to be advising on the recoloring job. You can't stop it from happening. It's gonna happen.
That's a good question.
How would you have advised Boland, let's say, or another colorist of your choosing, how to recolor the book?
I think you still have to, I think if you're going to do it, you are adjusting the already established color palette to current paper. You're going to be it's going to be reprinted on a glossy paper. Let's take this, maybe let's add layers or emphasis, and maybe we make it less flat. I personally love flat colors, but maybe we look more like modern colors, but we still keep the already established palette. So it still has that warmth to it.
Yeah, that's that would be tough too. That would be just because there is so much color detail that is lost in the transition. The idea of taking that palette and applying more modernized standards to it, I would like to see that. But who knows? They might not be done with this book yet. Maybe they'll give John Higgins another crack at it at some point.
Yeah, no,
facsimile editions are all the rage right now.
Yep.
True. I mean, I'll be honest. Facsimile editions are effing awesome. I love them. I'll take that over, alternate variant cover 55 of ASM 363, and here's a Peach Momoko version. No offense to Peach Momoko, but I'm done with. Listen, I understand the secondary market is its what drives in single issue comics, and I don't want to diminish that. I think it has its place. It's important. But that's just never been my scene. I've never been a guy to be like, oh, my gold ticket, look at it, 9.0. I can tell you, I did not bag and board any of my old comics, which I definitely regret now because of just prosperity reasons. And it's just, it's just reality. So,
I wanted to go back to just some of the.
Can I give my opinion of the Killing Joke really quick?
You didn't do that yet?
No, I let around the horn. I'll be really quick. I read this first in 2005-ish, I want to say, because that's when Batman Begins came out. And this is when I got back into comics. I was starting to slowly get back in more, getting trades. And I went into Everett Comics and Cards, which is my comic shop I go to now. But then I was living in Seattle, which I lived before in Lake Stevens, which was my old comic shop, which is, again, I'm going crazy here, but I went back in for the first time in like probably 10 years, right? Or whatever it's been forever. And I remember talking to the guy, and I remember this was not easy to find in 2005. I don't think this was reprinted for a long time. And I went in going, do you have the Killing Joke? Because I was buying all the essential Batman trades. I bought the Year One that day. I bought, I forgot what else I bought. I bought a bunch of other stuff, but Year One was purchased. And I wanted to get the Killing Joke because that was the definitive Batman Joker story I kept hearing, right? And he's like, I don't have a copy of it. Oh, I did find one, but it's kind of busted. And he did this. This is my first edition. He gave it to me for free. It was very nice. So I have this first edition, and I sat down, I read it. I'm like, I can't wait to read it. It's gonna be, I love Watchmen. I'm like, Alan Moore, oh my God. I read it and I went, that is the most overrated story I've ever read in my life. And I did not like it. And I know it did a lot for Batgirl, Barbara Gordon. I think it almost retroactively made her a stronger character. Maybe. I mean, I don't want to say that because there's a lot of Oracle fans, and that's the only reason why I say that.
Other people did.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. But I think that we don't want to downgrade that either, because I think that's important. I think they took a very negative thing and turned it into a positive. And I think there's value there. I really do. I want to I think that just shows you, I think, especially in the world of comics and long form storytelling, that these mistakes, you could say, can be turned around and retroactively reworked if done right with the right writers and creative people in tow. I frankly was disgusted by this book, to be quite honest. And I did not read this ever until last week. And so we're talking like Joe, we joked about it in our DMs where I was asking about it. I was like, I haven't read this comic in like 10 years and I haven't wanted to. And I will say this book was better than I remembered it being, but not that much better, in my opinion. And the one thing I will say that I forgot I wouldn't say I forgot, but the one thing I will say that I took for granted this book is how much it really influenced things like The Dark Knight. Because you think about it, the whole premise of this story is the heart of the Dark Knight character of the Joker. He's trying to show that everyone can break under the right pressure. It's not a one for one. It's not one for one, Chris. It's not one for one, but it's the spirit of it. No, I'm gonna let Joe go first, then go Chris, because Joe agrees with me. So Joe gets to go first. Joe, you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I totally get that. And there's obviously there's little bits from like Tim Burton clearly lifted a bunch there too. That whole because you could easily it's not verbatim, but you made me, I made you, for like that whole thing. It's like it originates from this kind of work. Yeah, I mean, I know I talked to two people recently who both said their favorite thing about this book is it indirectly led to Oracle. And
yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I get that. I think one of my biggest pet peeves with this book, I think it's a lot of people's biggest pet peeve with this book, is it was never supposed, and I think Alan Moore has said that, like, it was never supposed to be in continuity. Never.
Yeah, it never was, yeah.
So, like, he wrote this story thinking what happened to Barbara was out of continuity. That didn't happen to Barbara. So, I mean, that also affects it too. Would Alan Moore have made the same decision to cripple Barbara if he knew it was going to be in continuity? Probably not.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. I mean,
yeah.
I would. I don't know. I think you're right, but at the same time, Alan Moore doesn't really give an F either. Like, I mean, like, look at Swamp Thing. I mean, he was like, he just went crazy.
At the time, he cared though. I mean, like what he did in like Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, he did that because that was the end of the Silver Age. Like, he would not have told that story if it was like, and now, like, Lana and Jimmy have always been brutally murdered. Like, he wouldn't have done that, you know? Like, it's...
I kind of like the story already, Joe. You're pitching me a great story here.
So, you know, so it's like, yeah. So, I mean, that's a big thing that came from this. And, you know, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that. And I mean, I hate what it did in the sense of it's a victim of its own success, and that we all suffer because this book was so revolutionary that everyone had to do that. Like, every Joker story after this has to be like, we were meant to fight until the end of time, all that stuff. And it's like, you know, so it's definitely more enjoyable if you can if you really read it as being from that time and not being like, it's just another one of those stories. And it's like, no,
it's
it was really early.
Yeah,
like
yeah, no, I agree. I think it definitely is. If you look at it in a vacuum and not in the context of everything else, it's a lot better. It wasn't as vile as I remember it being, to be honest. Besides, I mean, like, I don't know. Listen, I don't want to get into like what happened to Barbara after the shooting, but it's that, it was weird. And I understand why maybe Alan pushed against it, but I will say Jim, I forgot, because I always felt weird when he strips Jim Gordon naked and he, you know, all that. It's super weird. It's super just weird Alan Moore stuff. But I will say that when that happened and reading it again, I forgot the turnaround of Jim Gordon was more impactful, and I will give it more credit that way, because I was like, okay, because it honestly made me go, man, like, he didn't buckle. Like, okay, I just kind of forgot some key things. So
there's a pull quote for you.
No, hold on. That was from Joe. He's the one that said,
I know, but Adam put that together by answering. No, Joe answered the question.
Joe's pull quote for the Killing Joke re-release. We will suffer. We will suffer.
On the front cover, Chris, you will suffer.
Yeah. Chris, you want to respond about is influencing The Dark Knight?
Well, no, I mean, it did. Like, I'm not saying, like, that's an objective truth. Like, Christopher Nolan even said that not so much the narrative content as much as the idea of giving, what did he say? Like a purposeless character some sense of purpose. That's what he primarily took. I guess I don't see this in terms of the construction of the Joker as a character. The books that loom far larger in my mind for that characterization of the Joker is Batman #1 and Batman #251. I feel like the Joker in The Dark Knight is the Joker of the Five-Way Revenge, primarily, in addition to maybe Brubaker and Doug Mahnke on The Man Who Laughs. Like, that feels like, you know, that was itself a modernized retelling of Batman #1, and I feel like I detect a lot more of that kind of characterization of the Joker. But I mean, that's just on the writing side, because Ledger himself, by his own admission, he didn't really want to read an comics when he was coming up with he was more influenced by musicians like Sid Vicious or Alex DeLarge from Clockwork Orange when he crafted the performance side of the equation. But the writing side of the equation.
Just listen, I'm not going to pretend that I'm the biggest Sex Pistols fan by any means, or Sid Vicious fan, but telling me like Sid Vicious is like your influence of like the Joker just diminishes the Joker performance, to be quite honest. For me, I'm just like, Sid Vicious is not that interesting. Sorry. That's just my own personal opinion. So anyway,
look, you take it up with Heath Ledger. Then he's the guy who
I will. God damn it! I'll be like, Heath, what the hell are you doing? Sid Vicious is not interesting at all. He's very boring in my opinion.
I think it worked out just fine.
whatever floats your boat as far as gets you to where you need to go. That I don't care.
It
but
got him where he needed to go. I think that's
I'm not arguing that. I'm not arguing that part. I'm just saying sufficiency by himself is not interesting.
Just in the sense of the status of this book now, it seems like a lot of creators, like modern creators, are kind of leaving this book behind in terms of the characterization of the Joker, because one of the biggest innovators, at least from my understanding, since I was pretty small when this book was published, was that it was a reimagining of the Joker's origin story, in the sense that it gave him something resembling an origin, even though the Joker is an unreliable narrator, doesn't necessarily set it in stone. But the concept of he was just an innocent guy that was driven irredeemably insane by a series of continuously terrible circumstances that just piled onto him. A lot of people seem to have left that behind. I mean, it certainly wasn't part of the Burton film, of course, but even in more modern times, there was
a better origin, in my opinion.
A recreation of the Batman origin by Michael Green and Whilce Portacio in Batman Confidential from 2007, where he was already a criminal.
Whilce?
And of course,
Whilce
Portacio did the first arc. This was the second arc. I can't remember who the artist was off the top of my head.
I was like,
Portacio did do the first 6 issues of Batman Confidential, but I was
only think X-Men and Image when I think of Portacio.
I think most people probably do, but
I know.
But even in more modern times, a story that we've talked about on this show, Zero Year, there's no trace of the Killing Joke in the origin for the character that Scott Snyder cooked up.
Unfortunately,
I have not read the Tom King reimagining of the first Joker story, but
it's not done yet. So,
okay, well then I've got time. But
they just solicited the trade for it, and the issue that they say is the conclusion is still 2 months out.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Provided they keep to that schedule. So
I mean, it sounds like the reaction to it has been good, but to that point, it doesn't seem like this is sticking as far in terms of like the characterization, the foundational characterization of the Joker going forward. And I wonder if that's a byproduct of the story's reappraisal, because you can't talk about the Killing Joke effectively anyway without talking about the rather questionable things that Moore decided to do with Barbara Gordon in particular, which was kind of telegraphing some of the things that he would do in work in other places later in his career. And look, yeah, it's hard to argue with the idea that Oracle as a character transcended the circumstances that created her canonically. She was seen, especially in her heyday, like during Birds of Prey and even parts of Suicide Squad from John Ostrander, as like an empowering figure. I know people who might have a physical disability really look toward her as a symbol of inspiration, and some of those same people were really disappointed at the idea that she became Batgirl again with the New 52. And it's a reasonable conversation to have. You don't get a sense of what would happen. That, like, I don't feel like Alan Moore was putting a piece of knowingly putting a piece of the puzzle in.
Of course not.
Knowing what those other creators would do. This was shock value and little else beyond shock value. And it's hard to read. I mean, Gail Simone has cited this as an original, almost an original sin of women in refrigerators, and it's hard to argue with her.
Yeah.
It totally. Barbara Gordon is little more than a crisis prop in this story, which is,
if I can,
please
dovetail off what you're going with here, Chris. Like this, the impact it's had on pop culture. Like, we've seen this moment get adapted in the short-lived Birds of Prey show, with Mark Hamill doing the voice when he shoots Batgirl. The image that we have up right now, not that one. That outfit is in one of the Lego Batman games.
Yeah,
which is for kids.
What?
Yeah. It's one of the skins you can have the Joker as.
Didn't they release an action figure with that outfit too? And people got pissed because it was like it wasn't an adult collectible line. It was like a
but come on, toys are. I mean,
I think they did.
I'm not going to get that mad about that. That's a little.
Well, it's just when
they
you
definitely have
it.
a partner to this figure that came with the graphic novel, but I want to say they did do a Lego version of it also, which I was kind of like, okay. But to your point of Oracle and being fridged, like there's a lot of Brian Azzarello stuff that I love and other stuff that I'm like,
you've opened it up, sir. You've opened it up.
No, I'm going there. The movie's fucking awful.
Oh God, it's fucking
I see how it's a 46-page comic. You're trying to expand it to 70 or 80 minutes. And you don't want to touch the classic part of it. So what they do is, well, let's show you what you've lost in Batgirl getting paralyzed. Let's concoct this, I don't even want to say adventure, of showing her in her prime and what she was capable of. Okay, beside the fact they missed the mark and give her this love story with Batman, the first 30 minutes have nothing to do with when we get into Killing Joke territory. And that should totally not be the case. Batman should be even more incensed. And it has no bearing. It makes all this alleged buildup of Barbara as a character to amount for nothing, because it has no impact on any of the male characters really going forward, and she gets sidelined, which, I mean, okay, yeah, she's got to recover, but it just made everything worse by trying to lift her up. They actually did the opposite.
Lift her up. I mean, you have to make her have to. It's so funny to have to. It's a lost art of, establishing people can be close without being like intimately involved. It's like, we can't just be friends. They have to show them effing, and then they know where they're close, because we know they took their clothes off with each other. It's like,
it's just so lopsided because the back half of it is such a narrowly rigid adaptation of the book,
Yeah.
And they clearly wanted to try and aim for a prestige feel by bringing Conroy and Hamill back.
Ugh, brutal.
But this was also a moment that was depicted, I would argue, far more tastefully in Arkham Knight. In Arkham Knight, it's a moment that is flashed back to, but Oracle actually has far more of a role in that story, and we actually see the result of her ingenuity from that point.
Joe, have you watched the movie? And we talked a little bit on our DMs here. I forgot if you watched it or not.
I haven't watched that movie. I've watched a lot of the DC movies. I heard this one was bad out the gate, and I was kind of like, I don't really need to watch this one. But like I watched the Hutch one, Long Halloween, a bunch of them. I think Public Enemies is still one of my favorite.
For sure,
movies, for sure. But yeah, I feel like one thing that you could change that makes this a more interesting story, even if you do this whole bit to a point, if you swap Barbara with Jim, and it's about driving Batgirl to kill, and seeing and making one of Batman's own acolytes kill. I think not only is that more interesting, but there's the implication that he knows her identity, which means he might know other people's identity. So you ramp up the threat level, and you don't have to get into why. It's just it's there, and I think you create a more interesting story while also not doing that creepy bit.
I'll never forget when I was at when we were when this came out for San Diego Comic-Con for the movie and they announced that they introduced this love angle, and I remember I didn't even know the response yet. My response was, that was an awful idea. And then I kept reading all these responses of people yelling it in the crowd, and then like Brian Azzarello saying, you're calling people names that I don't want to repeat on over the air. And I'm like, geez, it's just like, man, that was probably it probably wasn't the smartest thing to do. But I mean, yeah, the DC animated movies or the adaptations specifically, I think are pretty much awful. The exception of the Goats, which is Under the Red Hood. So that is always be the best adaptation of all time, in my opinion. That is fantastic. And the comic is great. The movie's great. Let's wrap this thing up, guys.
Sure.
So I really appreciate everyone's time. I really do. I really appreciate everyone putting their time out, their busy schedules and wasting time on my account. So I'll kind of go around the horn and I'll just ask you point blank, and then you're also just social media things, and we'll get out of here. Reverend, is Killing Joke bad?
Yeah, unfortunately. It's beautifully bad, but ultimately, as a pretty big Batman fan, there's a lot of other stories I'll go to before I'll be in anything resembling a mood to read The Killing Joke. It's just it's not at the top of that list.
And where can people find you?
At Chris Clow, CHRISCLOW, and hopefully here pretty soon for the Batman 656 episode of Knights Never Die.
And don't forget, Chris, next week we have Joe back. We have Long Live Allegiant episode 2,
which is going to be great.
It's going to be fantastic.
Probably far more joyful than this episode.
Yes, I would agree. I would hope so. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah. No, I've been going through those issues again as well, so I'm looking forward to that. You don't need the Miracle Machine to have me come back to talk about the Legion.
I just passed that issue, and I was like, "That is what's the term? Dox Ex Machina? Is that what you call that?
Deus Ex Machina,
yeah, whatever it is. I can't pronounce it.
I gotta find my flight ring. It's got to be around here somewhere.
Yeah. I felt like that was, I don't know much about DC, the continuity as much as Marvel, but that felt very much like a device for writers to use for ages, when that was introduced. But I'll save that conversation for next week. But yeah, I'm halfway through that. And I have questions. Which I'll save for that week as well. But it's been a blast. I've been posting. Yeah. I posted a couple things already, but we'll get to next week. But the one I DM'd you, Joe. Oh man, I was at work and I was rolling when I read that. Oh my god. Well, I'll post it next week on the show. They'll tease for everyone who's still watching. So, Joe, thank you so much for your again. You have donated a lot of time, and I appreciate it like crazy. I know you're busy. Seriously, you're very generous. But before we get out of here, is The Killing Joke bad?
It's again, like it's great if you're looking at it for the art. It's great if you're Brian Boland. It's bad if you're Alan Moore.
That's fair. That's a fair assessment. And where can people find you? And you give it to people where they can find your comics and everything.
Sure. On Twitter and Blue Sky, I'm at Joe Corallo, JoeCorallo, like it's spelled there. On Instagram, I'm at Corallo Joe. You can find a bunch of my stuff. You could look on Amazon, type Joe Corallo, a bunch of stuff will show up. But also, like you said, Beckstar and Dahlia in the Dark, 2 books I've done that are available through Mad Cave right now. She Said Destroy, which you can still get through Vault. I did Deadbeats Volumes 1 and 2 of musical horror anthologies through Wave to the World, which you can get through their website as well. I was just in the Archie Chilling Adventures Presents trade that came out a couple months ago. So I have 2 stories in that. You could also get the trade through Dark Horse of The Neverending Party, which I co-wrote with Rachel Pollack.
Awesome.
So, and you can pre-order King Arthur and the Knights of Justice through
Hell yeah, dude.
Maverick Imprint.
Dude, and that's awesome. And like again, I really enjoyed Beckstar. Go check that out. You can get a lot of some stuff on Hoopla too if you're short for cash. Hoopla is a good way to promote, and I think to read and support Joe the legal way, you could say, right? Joe is through Hoopla. So definitely check out, support Joe, support independent artists. It's incredibly important that we do that because it's hard to be independent and do this. And as a musician and wants to do comics, still it is a uphill battle, and Joe has managed to work his way and doing quality work and doing awesome stuff. So Joe, thank you for coming on, and I can't wait for next week to talk about some Legion of Superhero goodness. So
yes.
Thank you. And then Javi, El Corazon, is the Killing Joke bad?
I'm still trying to decide that for myself. I think
that's fair.
It got exalted to the position it's in because of the time in which it came out and how different it was and mature it was for readers back then. It certainly made an impact on me because of that, because I'd never read something of that stature before. But if it came out today,
oh God, it's destroyed.
It's a footnote at best. The main thing that I will always love about this book is Boland's art. Maybe not his coloring, although I like it, I think, more than others here on the panel. But it's just something about his line work and what he brings to Batman. That is, like I said, it's seared in my 12-year-old brain. Like, this is the Dark Knight, and I'm always going to flip back to this book just to look at the art. But story-wise, it's not my favorite Joker story. I don't really feel like it's something you
Andrew,
necessarily want to give to someone as their first Joker story either.
Yeah. This would be one of the last, I would say.
Yeah.
Me personally.
But we had talked briefly about this in our little chat. Like this escalated things between Batman and the Joker, and we haven't really 100% recovered from it, because from this we got Jason getting killed, and then from that we got Sarah Gordon getting killed, and I mean kind of Batman getting killed in Scott Snyder's run, and Joker dragons and everything that came after.
Joker dragons, no.
Yeah.
Chris, don't make me read that, please. Don't make me read that.
You can find me at batmanonfilm.com, where I'm reviewing Batman the Brave and the Bold, Batman and Robin, Catwoman, Batman Gargoyle of Gotham, which is a must-read Black Label book. First issue's out in color and a noir edition. The JamesBondDossier.com. I've got a review of Philip Kennedy Johnson's 007 number 4. Working on number 5 before number 6 wraps up at the end of this month.
Is PKJ writing everything?
I think so.
As he should. He probably should write everything.
Around. At the end of this month is his last issue before Steve Dillon takes. Steve Dillon? No. Ennis takes over.
From the dead?
No, Ennis takes over. My bad. I was thinking Punisher.
Garth Ennis?
Yeah, that one. Is going to be writing James Bond after this. So,
God. Yeah. I almost want to read it just to see how much of a shit show that's going to be.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Wow. All right.
And Comic Binge with Chris, we have Knights Never Die. So we will be working on that soon. The first episode was a lot of fun. If you guys caught it, I hope you enjoyed it. And then my own YouTube channel, Up to Speed with Wally West, just dropped my review comments recap of the 3rd issue from 1987. So, or no, it was the 4th issue. And then I'll be working on the annual next, once I find the time to read the very dense annual, which came out after issue 4. Instead of a year into it.
Yes. No, that's all that. Hey, you know what? It's all about doing things in your, very well said. Yes. For me, is a Killing Joke bad? I would say, as a famous GIF would say, not great, Bob. That's what I would probably reference. I would reference the Killing Joke. It's not great. It's not the worst thing ever in the world. It's just not. It's not very good. It's in my opinion. The art is great. The original coloring is great. I think there's good stuff in it, but overall, it's just kind of a ridiculous story. But and how it spawned an entire line of comic books that I'll be reviewing for the Batman Book Club here starting Friday, which you guys will all can check out, which will be the first episodes of Riddler and Two-Face, which is very, very exciting. I didn't realize. So yeah, check that out there. One Bad Month on the Batman Book Club. And like I said, next week we've got Long Live the Legion with Joe coming back. We're gonna be doing some deep dives with Jim Shooter. And I got a lot of questions for Joe. I got a lot of questions, but again, check me out on the Twitter, X, format, whatever the hell it's called. Herman22 with 2 N's, aka P Thug. Comic Binge, you put it on the Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff. You'll find it. So, Chris, why don't we get out of here? It's been too long as it is.
Read more